What's up, YouTubers? Today, we're going to talk about the Cold Steel Tiger Claw Karambit. This is a 3.25-inch blade, but it does have much more length than that, closer to 3.5. If you take a look at this linearly, it is about 3.25 inches. But when you take into consideration the curvature there, you get about closer to 3.5 inches. So this is about closer to 3.5 inches of usable space, and of course that's provided by that hawkbill shape of this particular thing. It's made in the Carpenter's CTS XHP premium steel. It sharpens really well, holds a good edge, and is in fairly stainless. This particular one is not a particularly fidget-friendly knife. It's built in with an Emerson wave grabber there, or wave disc, if you will. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. This particular baby weighed in at 5.0 ounces, so it's not light. It's sold with a plain edge or a serrated. I went with serrated because I was principally looking for something that would cut rope when I go camping. So, and it does a really good job of that. I got this particular one for $105 at the Cold Steel Amazon store. You can get it now pretty much anywhere for $120. Of course, I got it during the Cold Steel panic buys of 2020, and sure enough, I didn't need to worry about that. It seems as though this is going to be available just fine now. So in terms of comparables, I don't really have any other karambits, nor do I see myself having any other karambits, but I will compare it to a couple other Cold Steels that are quite large. The Cold Steel Recon 1, as you can see from end to end, this one is just about identical. And then the Recon 1 has a 4-inch blade. And then, of course, the Formax Scout, also another monstrous knife, but in terms of actual handle length, the Tiger Claw actually comes in longer, but then, of course, with that shorter blade length, you can see that it's comparable in terms of like what you'd consider heavy use, heavy honking, and of course, this one definitely is. Let's go ahead and talk about the pros at this point in time. The hawkbill blade shape, as I talked about, is a great cutter for rope, and just because it grabs onto rope really well, and as well with the serrations, it becomes doubly so. So for the purposes that I got it, that's a really good thing. It is a really excellent steel, the CTS XHP. I have absolutely loved it since I got the Boker Kalashnikov in that steel. Again, all the things we talked about, very stainless. It's got great edge retention, and it sharpens up really nice. So, also on the pro side, for cutting purposes, maybe not for sharpening. I guess it's a 1-in-1. But though you do have a symmetrical grind here that comes up to a saber there, the actual primary cutting edge bevel is actually a chisel. So there's no real bevel on this particular side, but there is on this one. So just be aware of that. It does make for fantastic cutting, and in fact, going back to that rope thing, one of the reasons that I want this and didn't mind the chisel grind is I'm going to demonstrate as if this rolled up t-shirt were a piece of rope, and without having to open up the entire blade, you can basically just sandwich that in there, clamp your hands down, and it makes a nice cut of that rope there. So for those purposes, the chisel grind works out really, really well. Do enjoy that. And then the last thing that I really found a very solid pro on this one is that the Emerson wave disc is really a great place to put your thumb in the standard holding position, which is what I'll be cutting most of my rope with. So really good for that. Just a nice little place to set your thumb there. In terms of the cons, this one I can honestly say has the worst pocket clip in history. I'll try to get that on the camera, but not only is it against this really very grippy G10, impossible for your pocket, but you can overcome that. Just go ahead and sand that down a bit. But this particular one literally has a downward sloping front end of that, so you can't even get this in. You can't get this on pants. You will literally have to bend this thing up to give yourself a little bit more of a ramp angle there, and it's very comfortable in the hand, but it's completely unusable as a pocket clip. So as far as that goes, that is a massive problem. And given the fact that this is really designed to be a kind of a fast release karambit style, that just makes it all the more worse that I literally could not use it without bending it. So I was like, I'm really not going to be using it for fast deployment self-defense karambit style. You know, so for me, not as big of a deal. I will say, based on the very, very long detent that, you know, this particular lockback, you know, of course, this is the famous triad lock, has, if you're going to try to fast deploy this as a fidgeter, be very careful because it has a massive detent escape distance that you have to go there. And it is strongly suggested just to go ahead and roll that. Don't try to do the fast, because if you try to fast, and I tried it many times and failed, if your thumb or finger gets caught in there, this could literally, you know, sever a good portion of it, and you're going to be visiting the ER. So that's a definite kind of, for me, one of the cons. Not a huge deal, just don't try to use it that way. I found that the karambit style deployment of this one in your pocket was also really awful. So we're going to pretend that my hand is my pants pocket and it's going into the top of the clip there. So my pants are right here. My general grab would be my finger to pull it from there, and then the wave would grab it. But I'm left with essentially a completely no man's land grip for a karambit style. A karambit style is principally going to be, if you're using it for self-defense, completely reverse of that. So if you're going to use this as karambit style deployment, going through that, you literally have to twist your hand and pull this thing out in such a way that it's very, very awkward. And I did try that when I just literally jammed it over my pants. But if you're going to use this for a karambit sort of grip, it's very, very awkward and completely non-intuitive. So as far as a self-defense weapon for a quick drawing karambit, I think it's actually not very good, and that's definitely one of the cons of this one. And then the last thing I'll say is, and I understand why, but I want to go ahead and pull up one of the other cold steels. Heck, I can pull up both of the other ones. But in terms of the lockback, so with both of these deployed, if you take a look at how far back the lockback release is on them, this one is so much further behind that it becomes very awkward. The Recon 1, for example, I can just very quickly easy pivot that and roll it back. Heck, even with the 4MAX Scout, same thing. Again, if you look at where that release is, it's much further back than even this massive honkin' cold Mac or the 4MAX Scout. So that being said, I understand why they did it, because if you're going to hold it as a karambit, the last thing you want is, you know, this part of your palm pressing down and releasing that lock mechanism. So I understand why they did that. It was to essentially get you so that you could never, you know, release that particular blade. So I get that, but in the end, if you're just using it like me for regular use, you pull it out, you want to use it, I really have to reach back very far, and it ends up being very awkward and difficult. I mean, I have pretty robust medium-large hands, and that is just, that's an effort to do. So it ends up being not a very good one-handed deployer and redeployer, you know, retraction back. So in terms of that, you know, on the whole, I guess overall, I would say this is going to be great for somebody who works on a boat. One thing I really found good about this aluminum, you know, karambit indexer here was that you can clip this on to a carabiner really easy. It's very strong and sturdy. Aluminum definitely kind of beat that around a bit. So it's good to be used on a boat and connect that to a carabiner. Somebody who has to cut a whole lot of rope, yeah, I think this blade would be fantastic for doing a lot of rope cutting. Or somebody who has extremely, extremely large hands, extremely, you know, big pocket, because this thing's just a pocket hog. I mean, actually, let's look at this. The 4MAX Scout, which is a monstrous knife, fits a very similar profile, and in fact, the Tiger Claw is even taller than the 4MAX Scout. So it would be somebody that has large pants, large hands, giant hands. You know, take a look at this thing. It's just monstrous. I guess somebody who's a giant has giant hands. This would be a good, useful karambit. Otherwise, I think really if you're going to truly use it as a karambit style, self-defense, this thing's way too large and definitely not recommendable. Like I said, for me, I like it. It's a good steel for a fair price that I can sharpen up relatively easy with this chisel grind, and it's got great serrations. So I'm just going to use it as a rope cutter, principally on camping and that sort of thing. But otherwise, if I think it's really only going to be useful for somebody who meets those other criteria. Otherwise, this is not a recommendable knife, and probably not really, if you're going to get into karambit use, this is probably not the one, unless, like I said, unless your hands fit that. Hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day. Take care now.